This summer, we've been working our way through the book of James. And we've been in chapter 2 last week and this week. Last week, we talked about favoritism. And in particular, how Christian people can struggle with the basic worldly issue of preferring people who are rich to people who are poor. And James never holds anything back. He can be very, very tough. And it can feel like he's being very tough on you in particular. If you read this book and you escape without ever feeling conviction, you are a better man than me or woman. The conviction is tough. And last week we talked about the way in which we can be preferential towards people who have means, maybe because they can provide something for us, and how sometimes people who are poor can feel like a drain. And James calls us to something bigger and higher than that as a Christian people. And he carries on this conversation into the second half of chapter 2 that we're going to talk about this week. He talks about the way in which we live, the way in which we treat people, and the way in which our faith ought to be put into action. How when we claim we're a people of faith, a Christian people, just simply making that claim may not be enough. There needs to be evidence of our faith. And so one of the questions that he brings to us that almost feels crass if we're honest, but it's worth considering is, can a prostitute be righteous? Now, this isn't exactly the language he uses, but as we read today, you'll see he names a famous prostitute of the Old Testament and declares her righteous. And this sort of declaration really should cause our head to spin. Because typically we would say our gut reaction to this question, can a prostitute be righteous? Our gut response would be no. Prostitution is sinful. It's a degrading profession. It's something you would never want your children to aspire to be. How could a prostitute be righteous? And yet James declares one righteous. How so? This is the sort of question that we're invited to wrestle with as we continue in James chapter 2 today. And so together we're going to read the second half of James chapter 2, verses 14 to 26. And I'm going to invite you, if you would, to stand with me as we honor the reading of the word of the Lord today. James chapter 2, verses 14 to 26. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such a faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. You believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And he was called God's friend. You see that the person is considered righteous by what they do and not faith alone. In the same way, was not even the Rahab, the prostitute, considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Last week we talked about how James has a history of famous, powerful Christian thinkers disputing the theology to be found within it. And this text is one of those places where people can struggle. But the question that's given to us in this text is helpful. What good is it to have faith but have no deeds? Can such a faith save them? This is perhaps the central question to the text today. Can such a faith save them? Do you ever get anxiety over whether or not you have enough faith or the right faith? Do you ever wonder if one day you will die, you will see God, you will be raised into his presence, you'll get a glimpse into glory, into heaven, into the place that Jesus has prepared for us. You will see its perfection and its wonder. Do you ever worry that that's the closest that you'll get? Do you ever worry that when you sit before God and you hear of God's judgment and you see of God's glory, do you ever worry that what will come across your mind is, did I do enough? I worry about that. I long to know with certainty. And this text here challenges many of the things that I hold dear. For example, one of the most important discussions across 2,000 years of the Christian faith is, what is it that saves you? What really is it that brings about salvation to you? And if you met 5 different people from 5 different Christian traditions, they all might answer this question differently. It's a complicated question. You see, if you were talking to a Catholic person, they might say that participation in the church and the sacraments is what saves you. If you were talking to someone from like the modern evangelical church, they would probably say, well, if you said the sinner's prayer, then that will save you. There are people who talk about doing good deeds that will save you. There are people who talk about mercy that will save you. There are people who talk about submission to God that will save you. There are people who talk about the second work of the Holy Spirit birthing within you that is evidence of your salvation. There are people who say that having the right beliefs is what saves you, as if having your doctrine in order is proof of your salvation. You talk to 5 different people, and 5 different people might answer this question differently. What exactly saves you? Which then makes it all the more complicated for someone like you or I to wrestle with our own salvation, to wonder what it'll be like when we stand before God on Judgment Day, and we might wonder, have I done enough? Because the conversation around us on this earth can be so varied. And for as many places as we in this room grew up in different traditions, we probably heard and had embedded with us different answers to this question. And as we wrestle with what exactly saves you, we can get really bogged down in theological nuance very, very quick. And this probably makes it very, very difficult for us to have any calmness in our soul about what exactly saves us. What I do want to remind you of today is that the simple answer to this question is, it's Jesus that saves you, not you. Right? This is first and foremost important, because we jump really quick into, what do I have to do to be saved? Let's not forget that the answer is Jesus died on the cross, bled and died for you that you could be saved. This is the answer to the question. How are you saved? You are saved because Jesus died for you. The next questions where we get bogged down so typically is, what do I do about that? And that's where the discussion begins complicated. But let's never forget where it begins. I am saved because Jesus died on the cross to forgive me of my sins. That is foundational. The question from there, the debates come out of, what do we do about that? What's our role from here? And James's particular response to this is, I will show you my faith by my deeds. I have faith that Jesus died for me. I have faith that Jesus is the Son of God. I have faith that God has acted definitively that I can be saved and spend eternity with him. And James is saying, I will prove this, I will show you, I will live this truth out by showing you my deeds. For James, it's important that his life is in line with what he says, that there has to be evidence that my life has changed. The best testimony I can have for the fact that I believe that Jesus died on the cross for me is a changed life. It's an outward expression of an inward work. I think a good litmus test for all of us, am I saved, should be answering this question, and it's a difficult question. But if someone followed me around for a week and went everywhere I went and saw everything I did and listened to every conversation that I had, would they have a sense of who Jesus is after spending a week with me? Is there evidence of the transformative work of Jesus Christ in my heart and life by spending time with me in uncensored moments? Will people see my love for others? Will people see an overflow of the grace that I received from Jesus, an undeserved grace? I do not deserve the Son of God dying on the cross for me. I have done nothing to make myself so great that I have earned that. Every bit of grace that I've received that has saved me has been given to me as a gift that I do not deserve. Has that free gift of grace so filled my life that it overflows out of me, that others experience that sort of grace as well? And well, when they talk to me, they may not be able to put their finger on, that's Jesus coming out of them. But I know that the reason I can show mercy and love and care and grace for others is because I've experienced a grace that transforms that I do not deserve. And it cannot be contained within me. There are many times and people that I've spent time with who do this way better than me. I wish I could tell you story upon story about how great I live this out, but I'm still working this out in my own life. But sometimes you're lucky enough to see the people that you love, that you're amazed by, live this out. And there have been times in my own life, that particularly in my marriage, that I've seen this lived out. And it's such a blessing, especially as a pastor who's kind of supposed to be always got it together, doing the Christian thing all the time, to be married to someone who you believe in, who you see doing this. And one particular moment that was transformative to me, that my wife taught me, was when we were in Indianapolis about 7 years ago, for what's called a General Assembly. So you've got Nazarene people from Nazarene churches all over the world. The Church of the Nazarene is in hundreds of world areas, and they've all descended upon the city of Indianapolis. Indianapolis because, you know, Christian people like Nazarenes know how to have a good time. Indianapolis. So we're in downtown Indianapolis. And there's this Starbucks not very far from where all these meetings are happening. You can imagine that because there's not a whole lot of bar hopping happening at these Christian events, that the Starbucks is where people are spending their money. So there's just lines in and out. We've got to get our drugs somehow, and caffeine is socially acceptable. And so there's just a line out this Starbucks. And every day we go there, there's this lady sitting outside of there on the ground, and Christian person after Christian person is too busy to stop and talk to her. She doesn't smell great, she doesn't present very well, she's dirty, and she just sits outside of the Starbucks. And so people are just walking by. This is a normal city scene, right? If you have spent time in a city, you're used to seeing homeless people, impoverished people sitting around. She doesn't have a sign, she's not asking for money, just people walking by her. Until one day coming out of there, my wife decided to talk to her. And what was amazed me about what Charisse did is not that she just treated her like a human or asked if she needed anything. That's one thing. Remember, she's sitting on the ground. But my wife walked up to her and kneeled down on the dirty sidewalk and talked to her. And meanwhile, me, good Christian pastor boy, is thinking, we're running late. what are we doing? And Charisse sat down next to her and listened to her and talked to her and listened to her stories about how brutal the streets can be and how mean drug-addicted people can be and how tortured she is by others. Her story really didn't have anything to do with these good Christian people not giving her money, but how rare that someone would sit and just listen to her hurt. And we sat there for 30 minutes while I had places to be and just watched my wife listen to this person and let her be human. We as humans love to share our story. And she just took in her story. Did she change that lady's life? No, she left some money for her. But she took time to see the humanity in someone who is just often treated as part of the cityscape. And you could see in this lady, as she broke down in tears, that it was rare that someone just let her unwind her story, to tell her story, to share what's hard about her life. And I learned a lot that day about what it means to be a Christian person. Because as a Christian person with a schedule, I can get really busy. I have things to do. I'm going about the business of being a professional pastor. But often the Christian work is in stopping and waiting and spending time, maybe even wasting time, for the sake of someone else. You see, we often will read the gospel stories, and all the time, especially in the Gospel of John, we're emphasized over and over and over that our role in this salvation thing is belief. Believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Believe that God has come to save you. And I don't want to undercut or undermine that because I think it is very foundationally important. So don't hear me undermining that. But James here reminds us of something that should really get the hair on the back of our neck to stand up, that we should perk up and lean into. Where James is saying sometimes we have made belief so important that we forgot what belief calls us to. Because what he says is, let's remember for just a second that even the demons believe that Jesus is the Son of God. That the demons believe that God was the creator. The demons believe that there's been enough grace for us to be saved, shed in the blood of Jesus on the cross. The demons believe these doctrinal issues that we fight and argue over, and we wonder and we hope and we make that it's enough for us to be saved. The demons believe these things. And in fact, it's their belief in these things that cause them to work so hard to work against us. The demons believe in one God. And they shudder. They have reverence for that. Belief, James wants us to see, just simple mental assent, does not separate anything for us. James here is saying we have been saved from something and to something. So let's not get caught in one or the other, but let's have a more holistic faith. Something that believes in the power and the glory and the goodness of God that causes us to long to do something about it. God is redeeming this world. God is working to save this world, and we're invited to participate in that. We don't receive grace just so that we can get status in heaven. We don't receive grace just so we can have a first-class ticket into heaven. We receive salvation to participate in God's salvation for the sake of the world. We are called from something and to something. And James ends this text today by talking about surprising people who demonstrate their belief by what they have done. James notes that the righteousness of people who believe are remembered and known by what they did. And in particular, James mentions Abraham and Rahab, two heroes of the faith early on in the scriptures. Abraham shows up in the very first book of the Bible, Rahab in the 6th book of the Bible. But we're told Abraham demonstrates his faith by doing what is right. What he does is credited as righteous, not what he believes, but what he does. And so we're reminded of the story of him sacrificing his son Isaac. And there's a lot to dig into here, because if we were to tell Abraham as a modern parable, we would probably call CPS and have him jailed, right? So let's be honest about that. There's something a little disturbing about this, but theologically speaking, in this text, I don't think the point is Abraham is a would-be torturer because God told him so. I don't think that's the point. I think that Abraham is testing God every bit as much as God is testing Abraham. They're called into relationship and covenant with each other. And my best read of Abraham is not that he waited 100 years to have a son, that he was given a son by God by grace, and that Abraham thought, oh, okay, well, then he's dispensable. I don't think that's what Abraham thought. My read of this situation is that Abraham knew the heart of God and knew that while he was being tested, that God was going to provide for him, that God was going to show up in the last minute, that Abraham was testing that God was as gracious and good and benevolent and caring and kind as God said he was to Abraham when they made their covenant with each other. And so when Abraham goes up the mountain, he goes through the acts of doing what God tells him to do. But I suspect that deep down he believed that God was going to show up in the last minute and provide him the grace that was the ram in the thicket. But Abraham showed God that he was willing to listen, even to the absurdity. And Abraham knew that what he did mattered. Not just pleading with God, saying, you know I would if I had to, but that Abraham listens to God, trusting that God is going to come through. And it's credited to him as righteousness. Not that he believed that God might come through, but that he trusted God would come through. So he did what God called him to do. And then there's the story of Rahab. I really hate preaching about prostitutes. I really do. Partially because I'm inclined to jokes, and I really don't want to make jokes on stage about prostitutes. I have so many questions about this story. If you've read it, it's in the I think the second chapter of Joshua. If you want to read it, the cleanest, the nicest way I can ask my question of this text is, what are these two spies doing in Rahab's apartment? The Bible doesn't answer that question for us. It just says the spies went into the land and they went to Rahab's apartment. And if you're like me at all, I've got questions. That's all I'll say about that. But as they're there in Rahab's apartment, the powers find out that these spies are there. And they start circling in on Rahab's apartment. And if the powers of Jericho are going to find these two spies, they're going to kill them. That's what happens to spies who are caught. And Rahab says to them, I will protect you. I will let you out of this city, but remember me when you come back. Surely God has delivered us into his hands already. Rahab knows what the future is. Rahab knows that her people have lost. And so she wants to protect these spies so that she's on the right side. But it's interesting her reasoning for this. She says to them, we heard about what your God did to dry up the Egyptian army in the Red Sea. We heard about how you walked across on dry land and how when you got to the other side, the waters enclosed on the army and you were free and safe. That story at this point had happened 40 years ago. The same people who were delivered from Egypt had been wandering for 40 years, and they were on the precipice of what God's next was. It had been decades since that had happened, but that story rang so powerfully in Rahab's mind that she began to have a trust for the power and the glory of God, for what God was doing and the might and the wonder of this God. And she wanted to be on that side. So she pledges herself to these spies, risks her own life, and sets them free. And the spies run back to Joshua, and they testify that the city is in shambles and they know that they have already lost. And Rahab is the one who gives them that belief and sets them free. Rahab knows facts. She knows the stories of what God has done. The question is, when she hears them, is she going to do something about it? And her answer is yes. She is going to do something about it. So she does. We learn in these stories that Abraham enters his relationship with God by faith, but he declared his relationship with God by works. It is by faith we are saved, but it is by works that we declare to the world what we believe this salvation is. Rahab, on the other hand, had faith that God would protect her, but she had to risk something in order to experience that God was worth having faith or trust in. Rahab didn't try to protect her now. This is key in her story. The way to protect her now in this moment was to just let the powers of Jericho come in and take those spies. That would have been the easy way out. But instead of protecting her now, she trusted God with her future and did what was right, and it was credited to her as righteousness. Now, you may be challenged to think about deeds or who I am or what I do. What am I going to do about all of this? Now, I want to remind you today that while the Bible will often close up with these epic stories of how to do this right, you may think to yourself, well, I'm never going to be a Rahab, thank God. You may also think to yourself, I'm never going to be an Abraham. That's reasonable. But we're not called to be grandiose. We're not called to be incredible. We're not called to do unbelievable, over-the-top things as our works. It's often just simple things that we're meant to do. We do not have to do heroic acts to be a people of works. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is to just say yes to the gentle nudge of the Spirit in your own life. That the works that we're called to aren't change the world kind of things. But when we have in the pit of our stomach that feeling that God is calling us to something, that we follow that. Even if it interrupts us, even if it seems insane, even if we think it's going to cost us something, that when God speaks to us and our stomach turns just a little bit and we can't get it out of our beating head, the sort of works that our faith calls us to is saying yes to those moments and taking the risk that God has something for us by saying yes to Him. And in order to close out today, I want to have someone from our congregation come and share a story. I've got with us Jen Apinis, who's coming out. She's got a series of 3 stories that she shared with me that I wanted her to share with you about ways in which God has just given her little things to do and how it had big impacts. So Jen, would you come out and share your testimony of the way in which God spoke to you and you said yes?
Yes, I will. Is this, okay, this is good. Good morning. So yes, I do have 3 stories for you, and they do speak to what Pastor was talking about today. So the first story I have for you is I was spending some time with the Lord, and I just felt that I needed a little bit of quiet time. And so after church one day, I told my husband, can you just drop me off at Barnes & Noble? I just want to just spend some time being quiet and doing my own thing, away from the kids. And so I'm sitting there, and behind me walks in a group of teenage kids, and I sensed like a heaviness about them. And they were quiet. They looked like they had had a rough night or something. I don't know what was going on. I was trying to focus in on my Bible time and just reading whatever I wanted to do. And one of the boys gets up and walks away, and I hear and I feel in me, follow him. And I thinking, follow him and do what? Because what would I give him? What would I say? Follow him what? So I did decide to listen to that internal nudge, and I followed him and found him in, of all places, the Christian Bible section in Barnes & Noble. And I looked at him. He just looked so down. And I just asked him, "Are you okay?" Because I didn't know what else to say. And sorry, I probably get emotional with these sort of stories. And he said, "No." And he just started bawling. And I was taken aback by that because I had no idea what to do. I'm just following and listening to that little nudge. And I didn't know what to do. And so I said, well, let's sit down. So we're sitting in the aisle in Barnes & Noble. And I said, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And he said, "We had a really rough night. We did some things I'm not proud of." And all I could think of to say was, "It's okay. It's okay. God loves you." And within that time, he said, "Well, my mom goes to church." And I said, "That's great." And he said, "But I don't know where I'm at with that." And I said, "Well, maybe this is me telling you that God wants some time with you, that he's calling you back to him." And he's just crying and he's shaking his head yes. And I'm rubbing his back, and he wiped his tears. He thanked me, and I hugged him, and I walked away. And that was the end of that story. I've never seen him again. I don't know who he is. But that was story number one. Story number two is I went to the gym, and I had a long list of things I wanted to do that morning. It was going to be a beautiful day. It was sunny. I love the sun. And I wanted to just have some more time for me. And so I am heading back home from the gym, and I remembered, I need something at Walmart. So I'll just run to Walmart, come back home. I'm going to Walmart, and I happen to see a woman on the median, and she's in a wheelchair. And I just noticed her. And I go into Walmart, I get the things that I need to get. I come back out, and I see her on the median still. She's in a wheelchair, and I just see the backside of her, and I drive away, and I'm heading home, and I hear again, "Turn around." And I'm fighting with myself with that voice that says, "Turn around," and I'm saying, yeah, but I have things that I have to do, and if I turn around, then what? What do I have? What can I give her? And I fought with that voice all the way home. I get home, and I turn around, and when I turn around, I knew that I was doing the right thing despite not knowing what I was doing. I get to her, and I ask her, "What do you need?" And she says, "I need a phone, and I need shoes." And I look down at her shoes, and her feet are they're turned inward, like they were stuck like that. So she was in a wheelchair, she couldn't walk, and she had these sandals on. I said, "I can do that." And she said, "That would be great. They're at Walmart, size 9. And I looked at them. I walked into, so I said, "Okay, I can do that." So I go to Walmart, and I'm looking for the shoes, and those shoes are right there, size 9, in the midst of other shoes where it just didn't belong. So I was like, "Okay, God." So I grabbed those shoes, and I bring them to her. And I parked, because I didn't want to just kind of toss them to her and go away. I parked, I walked over to her, and I sat down. And we talked for probably about 30 minutes. She was so thankful. She knows the Lord. I helped her change her shoes too, which again, as a human, you're like, oh, she's dirty. I don't know, but I'm like, no, like, Lord, you changed the sandals and you washed the feet. This is something that we should do. And I was feeling peace during this whole time while cars are zooming past us. And I prayed with her. She's crying, and she was just so thankful. And I gave her a hug, and I said, I'll see you again. Her name was Debbie, and I have not seen her since. I'm still keeping my eyes out for her, but I was able to meet that need just by listening to that nudge. And the final story I have for you is, this is probably about 20 some odd years ago. My husband and I were living in North Carolina, and it was my first day of work. I was to work as a first grade teacher. And I'm heading to work, and there's a gentleman in the median, and he's standing there, and my heart just broke. His skin was all sunburnt and dark. He had a limp. He had some type of brace around his knee. He looked really ragged. He had had a hard life. My heart just broke, and I go past him, and I'm on my way to work, and again I hear, go back, turn around. And I'm like, if I go back, I'm going to be late for my first day of work. That doesn't make sense. I need to set up the classroom. And I'm fighting with that voice again inside, and I get all the way to work, and I remember sitting there, and all I had was my lunch. I didn't have anything else. And I did not know what I was going to do. So I turned around and went back to him, and I'm looking at him, and I gave him my lunch. And this was a lunch that needed to be warmed up. It would be gross. I don't even remember. I just remember going, why did I do that? That was awful. But I ended up giving him my lunch, and I drove to work. And it was either that day or a couple days later, I ended up parking the car, and I walked down to him and talked to him. His name was Country. That's what he went by. And we just formed a relationship. We formed a bond. And the way that started was just meeting those needs. I asked him what he needed. I would give him blankets, an umbrella. And from that as well, it also turned into going to church. I asked if he'd want to go to church. I got my husband on board with this. It took him a while to be like, who is this guy? But we would pick him up. We'd bring him to church. Our car ended up smelling to high heaven. But we were able to form a relationship with him, an actual friendship with him. We would bring him to church. We would bring him to lunch. We'd bring him to breakfast. We would meet those needs. And the cool thing about this is that we were able to see other people in the church meet his needs too. There was another girl who said, well, I'll pick him up and bring him to church. And other people were able to help him out as well. So it was awesome. And so for the 2 years that we were down there, we had a really cool friendship with Country. And the other cool, really neat thing about this story is probably about 10 years after that, after we had moved, we were going to go vacation down in North Carolina with my husband's family. And we're at the beach and heading back home after the week, and my husband goes, let's just see if Country's here. We're going back through Chapel Hill, which is where we were. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, Country wouldn't be anywhere around here. This is not even the intersection. I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, I don't know, I just have it. And we kind of fought with that a little bit. And I said, well, okay, go ahead. So we turn around on the highway, get off this off-ramp where he never was, and Country was standing right there. And so we park the car kind of illegally, and I get out of the car, and I go, Country! And he throws down his cane. He still has his wobble, and he's running over to me the best he can. He would call me Angel. He'd say, Angel! And we hugged right there. It was just really awesome to have that bond. And he's just human, he's just a person. All these people are just people that need us. And so we said our goodbyes, and which was really hard, but Country, we never talked to him again. But those are my 3 stories.
I love hearing the stories of how God works in people's lives. And Jen has shared with us some incredible stories about normal, everyday things, simple responses to the nudge of the Spirit. And so when James encourages us to deeds, I think that our minds can spin out of control to emptying our bank account and moving halfway across the world. But let's remember that God has planted us and called us to the place that we are. And there are moments in our lives that there could be big payoffs for the sake of the kingdom by just saying yes to the nudge that God has given us. We are recipients of a grace and a faith that we did not earn. And our calling out of that free grace is to share and to spread that grace in the world in which we're a part of. And so God may speak to you in loud or quiet ways. But our role, our job, our work is to say yes to those gentle nudges and trust that God is going to do something powerful through people like you and I who've received a grace we didn't earn and pass it on to the world around us. Would you stand with me as we sing a final song?